With us now is Michael Grunwald, national correspondent for Time magazine. He wrote the article on Mr. Bernanke as Person of the Year. Michael, welcome to Bloomberg News. Thank you so much for coming in, because I'm sure your phone's ringing off the hook.
It's been a busy day.
I got a copy of your article, and what jumped out at me immediately was that you said that Mr. Bernanke, quoting here, just happens to be the most powerful nerd on the planet. Tell me about that.
Well, he's a very interesting man. You know, he's not a guy who went into economics because he wanted to get rich. He and his wife still share a Ford Focus. It's not quite paid off. He didn't go into economics because he wanted to be powerful. You know, he's not in it for
it's not quite paid off.
Not almost. Okay. You know, he's not in it for the security detail in the big office. This is a guy who was an academic. He grew up in a small town, and he got interested in the Great Depression, and he spent his career to really trying to understand how financial crises can metastasize into economic catastrophes. And then when he happened to be sitting in the chair, he knew how the central bankers of the 1930s had helped create a depression, and he was absolutely determined not to be the guy who did the same.
Let's talk, well, not on his watch is basically what you're saying. Let's talk about the power that Mr. Bernanke wields. He's undoubtedly the most powerful Fed chairman in history, given what's been going on in the economy here in the United States. You write he's the unelected czar of a fourth branch of government. Is that how some in Washington see it?
Well, people are talking, that's in a section where I talk about all the different criticism that's being leveled at him, and it really comes from every direction. You've got some people who see him as this, you know, this kind of crazy helicopter Ben who's bombarding the country with money and isn't worrying enough about inflation. On the other hand, you have, you know, sort of, he's Wall Street Ben, he's not caring enough about unemployment and what's going on Main Street. But this is a guy who, you know, whatever you think of him, you know, he actually, his father's pharmacy was literally on Main Street, and he's a guy who, you know, he didn't like trying to bail out Wall Street, but he saw what happens when the Fed is inactive and passive during a crisis.
Was Mr. Bernanke trying to get away from that criticism? Is that why he was holding town hall meetings?
Well, I think he did want to explain, because
just to show folks like his family and his neighbors in Dillon on Main Street that he got a grasp of what they were going through.
Well, I think it's important for him, from his perspective, for people to know that you know, that when the elephants fall, the grass get trampled, right? And that this is, you know, that this is not just, you know, because he wants Ben Bernanke to be more popular. He doesn't really seem to care that much about that or the trappings of office. But you know, as you know, the economy is really a confidence game. You know, it's a reason that there are all these psychological terms that you guys use about, you know, jittery markets and skittish investors and even panic. You know, credit comes from the Latin word to believe. And it's important for him that people have confidence in this economy so they can explain what he's doing, that he's not bailing out banks for the sake of bailing out banks, but that the way that a well-capitalized financial system can make an economy grow.
In our last minute, tell me about the respect he has from some of his peers. Namely, you cite Mervyn King, and you also cite Stanley Fischer.
Yeah, exactly, and Trichet in Europe. You know, it's interesting. I mean, Fischer, who's now the Israel central banker, was his dissertation advisor. Mervyn King, who's Great Britain's central banker, he used to sit down the hall from him when they were young professors. So these are guys who understand that this is a scholar's scholar. You may not agree with everything he did during the crisis, but he was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to inject liquidity in ways that the central bankers of the 30s never did. And he did take on extraordinary powers, and he's done things that the Fed has never done before in terms of pumping money into the economy and doing it in such extraordinary ways that have never been conceived of. But he hasn't done it just because, you know, he likes being the guy in the chair.
In our last 15 seconds, given how you have described him and how his peers have described him, would he be a little bit embarrassed by this?
You know, he was, I think, a little bit.
Really?
He was happy to have the chance to explain the Fed to, you know, we have 28 million readers, and a lot of them don't know anything about this institution that controls their money and you know, what's going to happen to their 401ks and the price of a loaf of bread. But I think as far as, you know, being Person of the Year, he's a little
Michael Grunwald of Time, thanks.